If you push people away before they can leave you, or you find yourself chasing harder whenever your partner pulls back, this episode is for you. But before we get stuck into the details, for those of you who are new here, welcome to the Relationship Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Boutros, and today I am joined by Dan Lunn, men's work coach. We're unpacking the abandonment wound, the pain that makes vulnerability feel dangerous and love feel unsafe. We'll be diving into how this develops, how it manifests, and most importantly, how to finally start healing it so connection stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like home. Welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Thank you.
It's awesome to have you here. I'm really excited to dive into your journey and how you help men. But for those men who might be listening to this and they don't even understand what an abandonment wound is, how would you describe it?
A man with an abandonment wound it means at some point in his life he's experienced some sense of disconnection from somebody that he relied on for survival. So usually this is mum or dad, the two biggest relationships that we had when we were younger, but it can extend beyond that. It can be other family members, friends, school teachers, sports coaches, basically anybody that we needed some sort of connection with, and at some point we felt that connection was taken away. What this ends up doing then is it creates this underlying sense that love and connection isn't safe, and then what that does then is it manifests throughout our life in different ways. The most obvious way is in romantic relationships, when we develop the anxious attachment, the avoidant attachment, but it usually comes with some sort of core belief that we're not good enough or we're not worthy on some level, and it just bleeds into every area of our life.
Yeah. In what ways have you found that it tends to bleed out? So there's the anxious avoidant attachment style as one manifestation, but let's say somebody has not even any idea about attachment styles. What does it look like in action?
Yeah, so we'll start with the anxious attachment. So for me, from my experience, it's this overwhelming sense that the person that you've got feelings for is going to leave you or reject you or abandon you in some way. So in order to maintain that connection and maintain that feeling of safety and survival, we will lose ourselves in order to try and maintain that connection. So it could be, you often see a lot of people pleasing, overgiving, self-sacrificing, a lot of just a real deep sense of insecurity within the connection. It's the classic stuff, if they don't text back within an hour, or they take a little bit longer to text back, it's that sick, anxious feeling that we get, thinking, the rumination starts to come in, thinking, are they pulling away? Have I done something wrong? And we feel the need to close this gap. And it's just, I try to see it as we spend pretty much the entire relationship feeling like we're on the back foot in some way, as though we're always been like hypersensitive to their emotions and what they need, and we forget what we need in that connection. And it can be really distressing. I would say it's something I've experienced before in the past. It goes beyond just the feelings, right? It becomes physical sometimes. That's why people struggle with things like IBS and headaches and tension, and it all feeds off this same energy. The avoidant side, which was also my experience for a little while, so attachment styles can change. I remember the first relationship I was in, it was very much an anxious attachment. It was very much me giving too much and not getting what I needed in return. And then when I had a bad experience in that relationship, my attachment style actually changed after that. So I became more of the disorganized, right, which is the combination of the two. I would be anxious at the start of these relationships, and then when the connection started to deepen, that is when my avoidant tendencies would kick in. It's like it's the jackpot of attachment styles for me. You get the best and worst of both worlds. So then the avoidant tendencies kick in, which can be a fear of intimacy. We can start to look for problems within the relationship. We can start to pull away when things get too close. We can start to distance ourselves when we feel that people are relying on us a little bit too much, and we start to shut down. And I know from my experience, I would rush into these relationships because I had this need to form this connection, and I was worried that if I didn't overgive at the start that they would leave. So I would do everything that I could within my power to form this connection, and then I'd get the connection and then I'd go the other way, and I'd start to look for reasons why it wasn't going to work. I would start to justify it in my head why I was pulling away. A lot of victim victim headspace, pointing the fingers, looking at the other person and saying, you're the reason why it's not working out. There's a lot of victim mentality, I feel, for that. But anxious or avoidant, for me, it both comes down to that same fear.
Yeah.
And it's either that fear of being abandoned, rejected, not being enough, not being worthy, and it just manifests in different ways.
Yeah, I hear you. So it's like two ways to cope with not being abandoned. The first way is to try and close the gap between you and the other person to make sure that they don't leave. And then the other one is to push them away first so that they don't get to push you away.
Yeah.
It's so interesting how the nervous system adapts to create safety. And when was the moment that the penny dropped for you when you were like, oh shit, maybe there's something going on with me. Maybe I'm kind of the problem.
Yeah. So the first time it happened, it was back in, I think it was 2019. So I was dating someone at the time, and I'd already started doing some work on myself in terms of starting to become a little bit more introspective. And I was still serving in the British military at the time as well, the Royal Marines. So my emotional compass was pretty off. My internal compass, I was quite detached, generally speaking. So I'd spent quite a lot of my adult life bouncing from relationship to relationship, not wanting to get into anything serious, whether that was attachment style back then or whether it was just the fact that I was in my early 20s and I was traveling the world with work. It's got to be a combination of a few different things. But I remember meeting this one girl and developing, real feelings, starting to fall in love, but I didn't really know what it was at the time, and it was frustrating because we would get close and then I would pull back and I would try to end the relationship, and then we would spend time apart and then I would regret it and then I would want to get back together. It was just this cycle that kept repeating, and I just thought maybe there's something I'm doing, because she's showing up consistently. She hasn't done anything wrong. She's a lovely woman. She's doing everything that I could want from a partner. Why can I not accept it? So that's when I thought, I'll try therapy. I'll see if that helps. And I sort of had an idea. My first relationship when I was 19, 20 was quite toxic, and I know I had some stuff from childhood that hadn't been dealt with. So I thought maybe something's linked. So when I went to therapy, this is when we discovered about the abandonment wound, which was great because all of a sudden I've got answers. I'm like, okay, this makes sense. Thank you. And especially from a man's perspective, right, we're very logical. We like to analyze. We like to have this intellectual understanding of why we are the way that we are. And it was great because I could speak about my patterns. I could speak about my trauma. I could speak about why I am or why I was the way that I was at the time. So that's what prompted me to take that leap. Unfortunately, that relationship didn't work out. And it's because I had this intellectual understanding of why I was the way that I was, but nothing actually changed. Because I was talking about it, and I definitely would never throw shade on talk therapy because it is a key part in everyone's process. I feel it's so important. But for me, it just became redundant after a while because I could talk about things all day, but that wasn't processing stuff out of my body. That wasn't healing the nervous system. That wasn't dealing with it energetically, all of which I didn't know about at the time. But that's how I first stepped into this world, was a relationship. It was just a kick up the arse to say something needs to change,
Yeah, I hear you. And obviously, therapy was the first step towards the change. What was the layer that came after that you felt really started to shift things in the right direction?
So when I left the military back in 2021, I had a huge identity crisis. I'd attached my identity to being a Royal Marine for a lot of years, and when I left, I didn't know who I was. So I did what quite a lot of people do in that situation. I went to Bali, go find yourself.
Find yourself.
Yeah. And I'd been in Bali for about 3 weeks. So this was about a month after I'd left the military. So I was going through some identity stuff. The internal work from a relationship perspective wasn't really the priority at that point because I was single. So it wasn't really a main priority. And someone recommended that I try a breathwork session, a transformational breathwork session, which I had no idea what that was. at the time. And I went to a class. It was supposed to be a group class, and no one else ended up showing up. So I just ended up having this one-to-one breathwork session with this European woman in this amazing sort of little temple thing she'd built in a back garden. I don't know what I was expecting, but it definitely wasn't that. And it unlocked something in me on such a deep, deep level. It was something that was way beyond the logical mind. And stuff's moving. I had this huge emotional release. Just the first time I'd cried like that in a lot of years, and I just felt this. It just unlocked something. It was the doorway to deeper healing for me. And all of a sudden, I had this experience of something that was, like I said, beyond the logical mind, beyond the analytical mind. Something that was happening that I couldn't explain. I just had to trust. I just had to surrender to it. I just had to go with the feeling, rather than the thought behind it. And all of a sudden, it just opened the doorway to deeper work for me. And that's when I became a lot more open-minded. And I started working with energy a lot more and understanding that and learning that. And then I got more into the shadow work, the inner child work. And all of a sudden, it just set me on a completely different trajectory.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the biggest realizations that is becoming more and more evident now is that you can't heal just through understanding and intellectualizing everything. You have to include your body and your emotions in that process. And breath work is a really cool way to do that. It's interesting that you say that led you then to the inner child work. So what did you feel was the correlation there? Was the emotion that you experienced something that was related to your inner child? Did it give you an insight in your inner child, or what happened?
So initially, no. What it did allow me to do was connect back to my emotions and actually start to connect back to my heart, which was something that I'd just been shut down for so many years. And it created some internal space. It just cleared out some old stuff that just allowed me to start seeing things from a different perspective. And when I look back at when I first went to therapy, I was speaking about things that had happened in my childhood. I was speaking about past relationships. I was speaking about all of these things, but I was still only speaking about it up here. So not only was I only talking about things, I wasn't feeling it when I was talking about it. So when I managed to unlock that part of me and reconnect to my emotion, when I started talking about things again from childhood and from past relationships, I was speaking about it through felt experience rather than just up here. And all of a sudden it just started to take on a whole new meaning, because now I could connect to the actual emotional aspect of it. It started to really sink in with me. Okay, this has had a big impact on me. Like there's a lot of emotions starting to come up now that I'd suppressed for so long. Any shame or anger or resentment or sadness or grief that I just hadn't given myself a chance to process. So it just helped me revisit things from a different perspective.
Yeah, that's amazing. And for those who don't know what like inner child work is, which is what we were touching on just a second ago, how would you describe that process? And I know that a lot of men in particular feel that their emotions are an inconvenience. So there's those two really important aspects of healing, which is feeling your feelings and healing the feelings that your inner child had. How would you explain that to someone who's resistant and who also doesn't understand what it is?
Yeah. So for me, inner child work, it's the first step. On any work that I've done with guys, it's always the first step that I take them through. And the reason that is, it's because all of these things that we experience in childhood, these coping mechanisms that we develop, these beliefs that we develop about ourselves, these habits, these triggers and emotional responses, it's like we become frozen in time, right? So we move on, and you look and we've got grown men, you've got a grown man, but a lot of the times when we get triggered and the emotions come up, it's that little boy that's taken over. It's the inner child that takes over, and because there's that part of us that's just frozen in the past. Logically, and when we look at time, as linear time, we've moved on, but in those moments where we do get triggered, it just feels like we're back in that moment again. And it's about reconnecting to this part of you, and the first step is always awareness, right? This is why therapy is so good. It helps build that awareness, but for me, it's about creating that space within yourself and giving yourself permission to feel the things that couldn't or didn't want to feel when you were younger. And it is a tough process, but unfortunately it's the only way through it, right? It's that quote of you've got to feel it to heal it. And I always try to describe it as it's like you've got to become the man that you needed when you were younger. You've got to look at all the things that you didn't get that you needed, that every child deserves, and you've got to learn how to meet that within yourself. And it's a process of rebuilding that connection. And I know when I first heard of inner child work, I rejected it because to me, it just thought, it sounds ridiculous. What do you mean there's a child inside of me? I'm not a child anymore. But it's about being able to see that it's more energetic, right? And the old residue of things that happened to you in the past are very much still alive in you now.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is how much your childhood shapes the core of who you are and the way that your nervous system operates, like specifically in the context of how you relate to other people. And it's to say that, what do you mean there's no child in me? It's like that child is always going to be a part of you. It's hardwired into your subconscious mind. So what have you seen has been the impact of doing this work now on your relationships?
Security, just that sense of feeling secure within yourself, which is just one of the best feelings. When you've spent your entire life, for as long as you can remember, behaving in a way of trying to prove yourself, trying to earn love, chasing external success, chasing external validation, always looking for the next thing, maybe this next thing, I'll finally feel worthy when I get this next thing. I'll finally feel worthy when I make this much money. I'll feel worthy when I get this relationship. And it's just this deep sense of insecurity that you're not conscious of until you start really looking at it. And to move, it's only when you move into a place of feeling secure and feeling stable within yourself and feeling safe in connection and feeling safe in love and feeling sure of who you are and feeling more authentic and aligned and being able to show the real you to the world without being scared of what they're going to think or without having to shrink yourself and morph yourself into a version that you think you need to be. It's only when you experience the other side of that and you realize just how good life can get and how good life can feel. It's only when you get to the other side of that I've found that you realize just how much you were surviving beforehand. And it's hard to communicate to guys sometimes, right? Because if we've experienced a certain way of being our entire life, we just think that this is how life is.
Yeah.
And we don't have that awareness of how good things can actually get. So I think for me, the biggest thing is just moving into that real sense of self and security. Yeah.
Yeah, and would you say that you managed to achieve that all by doing the healing work on yourself? Or do you think that there was any sort of external factors that also contributed to this outcome?
Yeah, definitely a mixture of both. I would say the majority of it, especially at the start, was done just with my stuff. The work that I was doing within myself, a lot of the inner child work, working with my energy and getting myself into a good place. But I feel like, especially when we look at wounds such as abandonment, they were first formed through that sense of disconnection, right? So you can only do so much of the healing on your own. The rest of the healing has to come from connection and replacing old evidence and finding new evidence that connection can be safe and connection can be nourishing and connection can be a good thing, and taking away the negative energy from it. Because I know sometimes we can fall into that trap of thinking, well, I need to be fully healed to be in a relationship, right? Which is just not true. I think if you are on your own and you are single, it's a great opportunity to do a lot of the healing and to make sure you're in the best position possible, ready for a secure relationship. But being in a relationship, you can both heal together, right? If both parties want to do that.
Yeah.
I know a big one for me as well was friendships, because I know some of my abandonment stuff from when I was younger came from a disconnection in friendships. So now having a group of friends around me now that want to support me, and it is safe and it is open and it is at the depth that I need it to be. All of these things, these external things do start to contribute. And what I really enjoy, or what I think is really beautiful, is sometimes you can get those moments of deep healing unintentionally. And sometimes it can just be a little comment that someone says during a conversation, or it can just be something that you read or something that you hear that maybe just hits a little bit different than it used to, because you're open to different perspectives. And yeah, it's definitely a mixture of both.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you touched on that, because I know from my personal experience as well, I went on this whole healing journey of trying to heal my attachment style, and I felt secure outside of a relationship. And then as soon as I got into one, that's when all the shit started coming up. But it was good because what I realized was through the work that I'd done, I had understanding and I had more space to be able to respond to what was happening. So there's definitely merit in doing the groundwork yourself. But it's like, yeah, all that shit's gonna come up again when you're in a relationship. And that's a whole other healing journey that you go through and that you can only go through with another person and creating those new experiences. I also love that you touched on friendship because I agree that having those safe spaces and those safe people that keep rewiring your nervous system to understand, like, I do belong, I am worthy, all of these things are amazing. And one of the things that you do is you run a men's group, right? Like men's retreats, men's groups. So can you explain like the thought process behind how you organize those things, and why specifically do you think for men that it's important to have those kind of connections with other men?
Yeah, so that sense of brotherhood and having other men around you that have been through something similar and that understand where you are, understand how you feel, having that as a man is so powerful. It's a brotherhood thing, and men need that connection with other men. What I've found is coming together in a circle with other guys that have had a similar experience, can relate to you in some way, is just so liberating, because all of a sudden the things that you're going through just don't seem as lonely as they once did.
Yeah.
And when we look at processing some of the things that we've been through when we were younger, the shame, the grief, the anger, a lot of men have suppressed that because we've been conditioned to believe that emotions are a bad thing, right? And that we shouldn't really talk about what we've been through. But I've seen time and time again when a man can learn to open up and talk about that and be witnessed by other men without judgment. It's so powerful, so powerful. And a lot of guys just don't have that, unfortunately. And I've mentioned before, it used to be relationships or friendships used to be built around drinking and going out and very surface level stuff. But it's not enough. You need other men around you that can hold the space for you, but also hold you accountable and push you. But we can look at it from a relationship aspect as well, right? I feel that a lot of guys who do end up in relationships and they don't have those male friends, they lean on their partners too much emotionally. And of course, it's a safe space. You should be able to communicate with your partner and express how you're feeling. But I think the trap a lot of guys fall into, and it's something I've fallen into in the past myself, is you become reliant on it, and if it's not expressed to your partner in that more grounded way, it's like, this is how I'm feeling, but this is what I'm going to do about it. If there's a certain way to communicate. If it just turns into this emotional dumping every time and you're grounded, it's a quick way to erode that emotional safety and trust with your partner over time, I feel.
Yeah.
It's really important just to have those men around you.
Yeah, totally. I hear that. There's like a whole piece around the conditioning that men have had around what they should and shouldn't feel. So it is one thing to get that emotional support from a woman, but I can imagine that there's such a deeper layer of healing when you get that from a man, because you've got in your reflection as well somebody who's gone through the same thing as you, and it heals one of those core wounds that you get from an abandonment wound, which is something's wrong with me. Yeah, it's super powerful. I really love the work that you're doing for men. Do you see that the themes tend to be very similar in terms of how it manifests for people? Because we spoke a lot about your experience with it. Have you seen that it shows up in other ways for other men, or do you think it generally tends to be the same?
It's pretty similar across the board, I feel, from the work I do. I know the wounding I work with is very specific. I know there's other wounding you can work with, and I know a lot of them sort of
Intertwine.
crossover, yeah. But a lot of it is around, it's the self-worth thing. It's the not feeling good enough. It's the fearing connection. But it's not just the relationship aspect. I know we mentioned the friendship aspect as well, but it fuels the addictions, right? It fuels the avoidance, the suppression, the numbing, the chasing external success, the men that throw themselves into career and they think that that's going to be the answer. It tends to be just relationships, sense of self, and then career, I would say, are the main ones that I've seen.
Okay. And if you were to kind of lay it out in a step-by-step process, you said the first thing that you work with is inner child. So if you were to share kind of like one practical tip that somebody who's listening to this could use to just start somewhere with their inner child, what would it be?
I'd say some sort of inner child focused visualization, which there's an abundance of on YouTube. That's for me where the deeper progress comes from. Journaling is a really great tool. Okay, there's certain prompts that you can follow that really raise awareness, but again, that's an awareness thing, right, which is always the first step. But the visualization element for me is one of the most powerful tools that we've got for this, because we can visually connect to that younger part of us. We can connect to certain memories from our past that hold emotional charge. And when we look at the subconscious mind, this is where this wound lives, right? It's in the body, it's in the subconscious mind, and the language of the subconscious mind is image, it's emotion. And we can use that same image and emotion to go in and essentially rewrite the past. And you can meet this younger version of you in these visualizations, and in those moments you can give him what he needs. You can give him the love and the reassurance and the validation that he needs. And again, if this is a new concept to anybody, it is weird when you first do it. Like it is strange, but I've found time and time again that this is one of the most powerful ways to form that connection and start to work with the actual energy of it beyond the logical mind.
Yeah. And as like, just to give people some ideas, when you think about the things that your inner child needed that you were tapping into while you were doing this work, what did you find?
Just some reassurance, really. Just that you're enough as you are. I'd say is one of the big ones. And like for me, my experience when I was younger, there was a lot of criticism. There's a lot of shaming behavior. Just a real lack of emotional attunement, and it just created this belief that I just wasn't enough as I am. I wasn't worthy, or I wasn't lovable as I am, feeling like a burden, just feeling like I had to act a certain way in order to get that approval and get that love. And one of the biggest challenging relationships I had was with my dad. So we spent a number of years, especially throughout my teenage years, not having contact for various reasons. And it was one of those situations where at the time, you tell yourself, like, it doesn't bother me, like it doesn't matter, I'm fine, I'll get over it. But then you just start to look at some of the beliefs that came from the back of that. And again, it's that sense of worthiness, it's that sense of not enoughness, and that's where you end up looking outside of you to fill that void, right? That's where the addictions come in, that's where the drinking comes in, that's where the substances come in, that's where the chasing the validation, chasing women come in, trying to fuel that sense of being enough. And it takes time as well to be able to rebuild that connection to yourself, because when I first started trying to connect with him, and this is something I see a lot of guys experience, is the visuals don't always come through very well, or the visual will come through but the inner child doesn't want to communicate with you. And it's about, you've got to rebuild that trust, right? It's no different to if a child came up to you in real life, and if they were scared or they were upset or they were angry or whatever the emotion was, you would give them that reassurance. You would give them that comfort. You would give them what they needed in that moment. But we're not doing that to our own inner child. Firstly, because we're not aware of it. But essentially what we're doing is our inner child's coming to us with that fear and with that upset. And we're just discarding. Nah, you shouldn't be feeling like that. You wouldn't do that to a real child. And I found that it just takes time to rebuild that trust.
Yeah.
Because for so long they've been in the driver's seat. They haven't trusted you to take the lead because you haven't known how to take the lead. It's just a case of rebuilding that trust over time.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And the inner child piece is one aspect of it. What's usually like the second stage that you would take someone into when you're doing this work?
So body-based work, for sure. Breath work for me is one of the most powerful things for that. It's just getting some old stuff out of the body. Some of this negativity, this heaviness that we've been holding on to, right? Because every time we suppress an emotion, every time we suppress our truth, every time we wear a mask in order to fit in, every time we morph ourselves into a version that we think we need to be in order to be accepted, that energy doesn't leave the body, right? It just gets stored in the body. And over time, it just gets heavier, heavier, heavier. Taints our view of ourselves, taints our view of the world, and we just don't see things clearly.
Yeah.
So when we start working with the body and releasing some of this energy, it just creates space, it just creates that sense of lightness. All of a sudden things just don't seem quite as heavy as they used to. And like I said, breath work really powerful for that, but it's just other things, super simple things, grounding, getting outside, putting your feet on the earth, spending time in nature, reconnecting more to the breath. Super simple stuff, and a lot of this stuff is simple. I think I've fallen into the trap before of, well, no, it needs to be complex for it to work, but quite often it's just world-class basics, right? That's done
But don't you find
consistently.
that for somebody who is struggling with that abandonment wound, these simple things actually feel really fucking hard?
Yeah.
It's really hard because when you're so, you almost get addicted to the chaos that's been happening internally for so long. It becomes so normal that if you're trying to slow down and actually say, hey, let me be present, let me find some safety in my body, your body's just like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's
Actually
interesting.
really difficult.
Yeah, I was speaking about this the other day, actually. It's really interesting. It's some guys will say, I find it hard to sit and meditate, or I get uncomfortable
Yeah.
and I have to stay busy. And I'm like, well, that's your doorway right there. The things that you are trying to avoid are going to come up when you try to be still because you're not used to it, because you are, more comfortable in that familiar chaos. And it does take time, but it's about baby steps, and just
Yeah.
taking it sort of one day at a time. And maybe the first time you sit down, you can only sit with yourself for 2 minutes. That's fair enough. Next day you do 2.5 minutes. The day after you do 3 minutes, and you build this capacity to be able to do it. But this sense of being familiar in the chaos and becoming addicted to the chaos is a really important thing to watch out for, I feel, especially from a relationship perspective.
Yeah.
And going into a relationship and just needing those fireworks straight away, and it's like, the fireworks have got all these butterflies, and I can't sleep, I can't do anything because I'm just thinking about this person all of the time. And quite often that's maybe not the best sign, or it's a sign that you just need to just slow down a
Mm.
little bit. But
Yeah.
something I used to experience myself. I used to be really addicted to those emotional highs and lows, the push pull, toxic relationships, the breakups, the get back togethers, the intense arguments. And that was probably one of the biggest signs of healing for me, was getting into a relationship or dating a few months ago for the first time in a couple of years. I spent a couple of years single, no dating, nothing at all, just focusing on myself and getting back into the dating world, and things going well at the start, and then noticing some behavior from the other person that in the past I would have been pulled into, I would have been sucked into,
Mm.
being able to see it for what it is and being like, no, my nervous system doesn't resonate with that anymore. Like that, I'm not going to feed into that pattern. And when we talk about relationships being a mirror, and it's really good because it brought up some stuff and a couple of bits of me that I haven't had to deal with before, which was good, like my own internal work. But it was
Mm.
also a really big mirror of my past, and it was almost, I sort of see it as an opportunity from life, really, then, to almost like a test. It's like, okay, you've done all this work, well, we're just going to send you another test here, like, let's see how you respond to this. And instead of getting pulled into the drama straight away, it was like, that's not for me, and
Yeah.
it's just a real good confirmation of all the work that you're doing is actually making a difference.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's, would you put that down to creating a new baseline of safety in your nervous system? Like you just generally feel safe in yourself. Therefore, anything that kind of triggers a feeling of inconsistency or confusion just is so big that you're just like, nah, that's, I can feel that. Whereas before it might have just felt really familiar and you're like, oh, this is like home.
Yeah, that's it. It's that home familiar feeling, right? But yeah, it's just from that increased sense of self-worth and knowing what I'm worthy of, and knowing what I want from a relationship. And in the past, that insecurity would have taken over. And if I'd have felt someone pulling away or whatever it may be, or if I'd have felt the emotional highs and lows, I would have just fallen into it unconsciously because I just didn't have much of the awareness. But this time it's a case of, well, I know what I want, I know what I'm worthy of, and if I see behavior that I disagree with and we can't come to a resolution, I'm not scared of being on my own. I'm not scared of being single again. Whereas in the past, the thought of leaving a relationship and being alone again, and am I going to meet anybody else, and maybe I should just stay in this relationship because I don't want to be on my own. I don't feel
Yeah.
that way anymore. That doesn't mean that ending that situation didn't come with some sense of sadness. And it did, because it felt like it was a promising situation. But I know what I want, I know what I'm willing to compromise on, and I know what I'm not willing to compromise on. And I just think when you get to that point, I think when you probably resonate with this, I think when you've done so much work on yourself and you get yourself to a certain point, you raise the bar as to who has access to you.
Yeah.
And some of the deep stuff, heavy stuff that you've had to go through to get to that point. And you think, for me, I just thought, I'm not
doing
I'm
this
not
again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's just being able to
Absolutely.
stand in your worth and just say, no, thank you.
Yeah. And this lack of fear around being alone, I think, is such an important one, because it's kind of the driver of the abandonment wound, which is like, I don't want to be alone. I don't want people to leave me. So there's so much power in just being able to be comfortable in your own company and building a life that is so fulfilling, with your friendships, with your work, having meaning, purpose, and connection to yourself. That is such a powerful piece of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say, yeah, for sure. And it comes back to that alignment with yourself, right? And knowing who you are, and knowing what you stand for, knowing your values, knowing what you want your life to look like, and being able to bring that to the world. That's what a lot of this stuff is. I always say a lot of healing it's removal, right? It's, especially from a man's perspective, but society as a whole, we're conditioned to look outside of us for the answer. We get more of this, more of this. This is going to give me the answer that I need. But the healing for me is just removal. It's just working through, removing old fears, removing trauma, removing insecurities, removing conditioning. And that creates space then for the true you, for the real you to emerge. And you get so comfortable in who you are and what you can bring. And when you can get to that level of authenticity, and I feel like it's an ever evolving process, right? It's something I'm constantly working on, and will always be working on, because we're always changing. But it's been able to stand so firm in your truth and know who you are, and just bring that to the world unapologetically, and just say, this is who I am, this is what I stand for. I'm not trying to earn anybody's approval anymore. I'm not trying to get people to like me. I'm comfortable with being misunderstood. I don't need everybody to like me. And if I bring that, then the right people will find me. And that is friendships, that is clients, that is relationships. Because for me, anything built on the survival self, the false self, it's not fully aligned. And if anything that's built from that survival, from that lack, from that fear, is going to eventually crumble, from my perspective, especially when you get onto this path. When you start to go through your awakening, when you start to look deeper inwards instead of outwards. Part of that process has to be accepting that there's going to be a lot of people that just don't resonate with where you're going and the things that you're saying. And for me, the quicker I got to that point where I just didn't care, not in like a careless way, but in like I'm so comfortable in who I am now, and I can recognize the work that it's taken to get here, that I just trust with every ounce of my being that everything's just working out for me. Everything's unfolding exactly as it needs to. Even the hard stuff, I can look back at everything that I've been through and I can think, I know exactly why that had to happen. I remember at the time it felt horrible. There was times that I didn't want to be alive anymore, when I look back. But I look back at that time now and I think, well, that had to happen, because it got me to where I am today, and I couldn't have got to where I am today without going through all of that.
Yeah. And it takes an incredible amount of work, self-awareness, and courage to actually get to this point where you are today. And I think, and I hope, that so many men will be inspired by the work that you're doing and everything that you're saying right now, to take the step for themselves. But just in case they're not quite convinced yet, what is one thing that you wish somebody told you in the very, very, very early stages before you started jumping into this work that you feel would have made you go all in?
I'd say the way out is in. And that life can get so much better than you could even possibly believe. I think that would have been enough to just, let's do it. Short-term sacrifice for long-term gain.
Yeah. Awesome. I love it. I love it so much. Thank you for coming on and sharing everything. It's been really insightful, and I hope that anyone who is listening will go away and start this work for themselves.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.
No worries. Take a notice to second what stayed with you from this episode and share it below. I always love hearing what hits home for you. And if this helped you, please send it to someone who might need the reminder. Take care, and I will see you in the next one.